What is going on, everybody? I ended up doing another video for you guys. I'm on fire right now. Me and my girl was just having a conversation about growing up Christian, and I realized that in the black community, this is a very sensitive topic, but I feel like we really need to get into this discussion. So this video is about the dangers of growing up Christian. I am a kid who grew up, semi-PK life. My dad was a youth pastor. My grandfather was the original pastor. And when he died, his brother took over the church as the official pastor. So what I experienced growing up in a black Christian family was, I feel like Christianity is a breeding ground for narcissism. From the very beginning, a black Christian kid is taught to behave and think like a narcissist. You're taught to not socialize with people who think differently than you. You're taught to not defend your perspective or your points of view intellectually. You are taught that things that are natural human desires are filthy, wrong, sinful, and are going to lead you to hell, which a lot of the times, this is the same reason why a lot of black kids are over-sexualized as kids, because they go into their sexual lives not really ever being informed or having a sex talk with their parents. And I know that a lot of people are going to say that they've had this same experience that I'm describing right now. I am 28 years old, and I have never talked to my parents about sex one time in my life. I know that there's thousands of black kids all over the world who never talked to their parents about sex. The reason why they got pregnant at 16, their parents never had a healthy conversation with them about the role that sex plays in your life. This is a big, big problem in Christianity, because you are taught that sex should bring about feelings of shame and guilt. People will rarely educate themselves about sex, nor will you really ever have an in-depth conversation about the physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of sex and how that plays a role or function in your life. I feel like I've never had a proper conversation in any regard about sex with my parents due to the fact that we grew up in a Christian home. Number two, I feel like Christian people are teaching a narcissistic ideology a lot of the times in black Christianity, whereas when I go to people's churches, or I don't really go to church, I don't know why I said that. When I talk to people who go to church from different cultures and I hear other people's opinions, a lot of the times I don't see that other cultures tell, their children or the people in their community to not engage with, have conversations with, or connect with people outside their culture. In Christianity, you, as a black Christian anyway, right? Like the Church of God in Christ, the Pentecostal culture, a lot of that would have you to believe that you shouldn't be friends with Muslims, you shouldn't be friends with Hindus, you shouldn't be friends with anyone that has any ulterior spiritual practices. I do feel like the Bible can offer some guidelines for better behavior, right? I do feel like there's a lot of historic and spiritual wisdom that you can gain from the Bible. I just don't feel like the Bible is the only place exclusively where you can gain insight or wisdom. I feel like you can gain, wisdom from the writings and the mythos of every culture in the world has written about the natural phenomenon, creation, God, spirituality, all those things. And I think there's something that can be taken from all of those things. So that's what I mean when I say, I feel like it's a situation where you're taught to reject anything that's different from you. Hold on one second, guys. I'm getting a call. I'm just going to cut back in on the video when I'm done. One sec. And we're back. I don't remember where I was at exactly, but we were talking about the problems with growing up inside Christianity. So we talked about, the first reason I gave you was that it breeds narcissism, right? It creates narcissism because It teaches you to believe that you are the person that knows everything and everyone else around you is wrong about what they think and believe. So I don't know about other people, but in Black Christianity, that's definitely how you're taught to think. Everything you say, everything your pastor says, you feel me, your parents, that's correct. Everything else anybody else has to say is incorrect. You're really taught to not socialize with Muslims, with Hindus, with anybody that has different beliefs than you, completely off limits. Then we also talked about the lack of sexual education in Christianity. You essentially are in a system where instead of having healthy, appropriate conversations about the role that sex plays in your life, you are essentially shamed and guilted for having natural human desires. And so you're never really having the proper conversations that would allow you to figure out what role sex plays in your life at that particular time, because you're just essentially told to avoid something that is human. So, and in that regard, it makes you make bad decisions, right? Another thing, growing up Black and Christian, right? You grow up under socialized. So because you are told to only hang out with a certain group of people, a lot of the times you'll see people who grew up in the church, and when they become adults, if they didn't leave for college or have a reason to move away from, like, you feel me, where you guys grew up, you'll notice that they never really fully grow up because they only were around people who thought the same things that they thought. So then as they get older, they're so under socialized because they haven't really had natural conflict. They're not dealing with different types of people every day. They're just used to everybody agreeing with one individual's thoughts, right? Like, another thing, in Black Christianity, you're not allowed to challenge your pastor, right? You can't say that he's in error in what he's saying, or you can't challenge someone who's in a position of perceived authority, which I think teaches people to ultimately not think because you're not allowed to challenge ideas. In any system where you're taught to not be able to challenge ideas, like, it would be different if someone in the Black church would be able to stand up and be able to take on certain questions, comments, conversations that happen with everybody that I knew that grew up in Black church. You feel what I'm saying? So with all of that put together, I feel like a lot of times Christianity does a lot of harm. It does a lot of harm. And I understand that people want to be able to implement certain rituals of discipline with their children. And a lot of people will use Christianity as a way to form a belief around God and basically have some form of spiritual practice growing up in the household. But most people don't realize, especially Black Americans don't understand that they're in mental shackles. You have mental chains on your brain, because you got to understand that the Bible has nothing to do with Black people. The Bible is a book about the Roman Empire, Jews, and Palestinians. Nowhere in the Bible are they really, I mean, other than in books where they're in Egypt, where they're clearly in Northern Africa, and, you know, you basically will get some historical guidelines that would tell you that there was a lot of events that are in the Bible that were happening in Africa. But as far as the book itself was not written for Africans. It was written for Jews. You feel me? And their struggle and their power struggle for politics and everything else in the book are related to Jews and Palestinians, which is not an issue, because that doesn't take away that there's wisdoms in the book. But how hard Black people ride for King James is telling of how little we understand about who we are. Because the early Nigerians, Ethiopians, we invented mathematics. We invented lighting systems, road systems, right? Just like everybody else in the world counts in grams, kilograms, because numbers, right, work in groups of tens, right? Ones and zeros are groups of tens. So why is it that America wants you to be ignorant to how math has worked everywhere else in the world? It's because if you uncovered and understood a lot of the history behind why these things were put into place, a lot of people don't understand that religion, especially Christianity, is used as a control mechanism. to keep blacks in a docile state of mind. In a docile state of mind. If you grew up with a black mother or black grandmother, a lot of the times the most your grandmother, your mother could tell you was to be safe, to protect yourself, to use the systems in the society to the best of your ability to keep yourself safe. You know, our grandmothers didn't tell us to go out and be gangsters, to tell us to go out and run the streets or anything like that. But there is a tribal element to not growing up in a religious background that is congruent with living in reality. Like, the reality of the world is at war. The world fights for resources. Business is not fair. It's based on politics, associations, friendships, alliances, things of this nature. Power, right? There are rules and dynamics that come with money and power. So as a Christian, you are taught to not engage in your day-to-day survival, your day-to-day need to improve. You are taught that you're not supposed to pursue finer things on earth. You're not supposed to work hard, conduct great business, and do all these things. That's not the culture of Christianity. It's to talk about pursuing wealth. So a lot of the times we grow up thinking that money's not very important, and money's not the most important thing, but it is important, right? And in that narcissism bubble, a lot of the times you have a bunch of ministers, pastors, different people like this who are making claims to performing miracles, deceiving people to the extent at which they specifically are acting as the hand of God. Like, I'm gonna do a video for you guys later, because there's a character named I'm not gonna say his name right now. I'm gonna do a video for you guys later, and I'm gonna give you guys some examples of things inside the culture that I think are very unhealthy, and I'm gonna let you guys comment on what I'm seeing in the new age preachers and teachers, and you can tell me if you disagree or agree with what my perspective is on that. But as far as what I'm saying is, a lot of the times, because there's so many, like, what I would call prosperity gospel ministries, and there are so many people within the faith that are there to put on a performance, you know what I'm saying, and get your money how you get it. If that's how you got to get your money, get it. But all I'm saying is there's a level of narcissism where if you grew up with Christian parents, you likely had parents who were not okay with you challenging their ideas. What they said was correct, and it was reinforced by the ministry, the pastors, and a lot of the times in the ministry, people are giving advice and talking about things that they're not qualified to be making such like declarations and exact pronunciations on. You feel what I'm saying? Like, people will make exact claims to stuff that they're not even qualified to discuss. They'll tell you that you have a demon, you don't need to see a doctor. They'll tell you, I can pray it off of you. And because people get caught up in some of the theatrics that is going to be prevalent within the black Christian culture, because you got to remember, ain't nobody else doing this stuff. When you go to white churches, Mexican churches, you don't really be seeing people, you know what I'm saying, falling out, running around the church, shaking their wig and shit. Their wig fucking flies off in the church type shit. You don't see this type of stuff. People ain't in there screaming and yelling for 6, 7, 8 hours, just in an unorganized fashion. We all just in there listening to music, dancing, doing all this crazy stuff. You don't see that anywhere else. So where is that coming from is my question. And also, do you guys see the problem or some of the issues with growing up in a Christian home, not being taught about relationships in a healthy way, having an unreasonable or unachievable standard for what you're doing being acceptable to the people who are attempting to make you believe that things need to for certainly be a certain way? I feel like it leaves so many gaps. Most of us end up in the streets or end up trying to discover more than what we need to at that time, just because we're being told that we shouldn't learn. How do you discourage a generation from learning? How do you tell people that there are questions that they cannot ask about something, and expect in a world where the internet, right? Like back when I was a kid, we didn't really have internet like that. You know what I'm saying? So all the information didn't just, like, everything you type into Google, like, populate thousands and thousands of videos and research and fucking all this different stuff that we have today, we didn't have back then. So when you ask somebody something, you would expect for them to try to lead you in the direction of where you can get that information. Most churches are empty today without using that prosperity gospel, giving away cars and all these different showboating, you know, theatric tactics, as I call them, like, because people have the internet and shit is not making sense anymore. Like, people are not feeling like, oh, it makes sense to get married. It makes sense to not have sex and to make sure that I have a legally binding contract with the government before I have sex. Like, to me, that is just ridiculous. In a world where we have condoms, we have contraception, we have all these things that deter what we were trying to avoid, or would have been trying to avoid in the ancient world. Like, there are certain things that just don't make sense in today's world that people can Google, you feel what I'm saying? And it's not matching up with with the experiences they're being told by the Christian church. You feel what I'm saying? So that's just, hey, I wanted to have this conversation very quickly. I didn't want to harp on it for too long, but I would love to hear your thoughts, comments, what your experience was. If you watch this video and you say, I'm someone who grew up in a Black Christian home and I had this experience, or I could totally relate and I feel like I agree with what you're saying, I want to hear what you guys have to say below. So make sure you comment on this video, like this video if you agree with what I was saying in this video, share this video if you can, but make sure you smash the subscribe button if you've been watching a couple of my videos already and you have not yet become a subscriber. If you could just do me that one thing. My first goal is to get to 500 subscribers, so I'm going to be shooting a lot of YouTube videos in hopes to hit this target, because I've got big dreams for YouTube, for music, for art, and I've taken the time to step away from being a day-to-day entrepreneur business person to being a content creator, to wanting to just express myself, create value, and open up conversations and doors so that I can have a show and be able to help people work through different mental problems that they probably experienced if they grew up in the Black Christian church, if they grew up in Black culture, if they had a single parent, if they had both their parents. Let's get into this. We're going to fix the culture. Make sure you comment on this video and give me your thoughts. I can't wait to talk to you guys on the next video, and we'll see when that is. But for now, that's going to be all. Catch you later.